Okay, welcome. I'm very happy to have this be our second episode of the Healthy Brain, Healthy Mind podcast series for May as Mental Health Awareness Month. And today we're going to be talking with Dr. Manjari Murali, who is a professor here at Chapman, and she'll tell a little bit more about herself. But today's topic is something I personally, and you and I both have a very strong interest in. And the topic for today is meditation builds a better brain. I think I'd like to just start by just introducing our guest for today. I call her Manjari because we work together, so that's just a informal. We will be referring to each other. But Dr. Murali is an assistant professor here at the Korean College. She has her background, her expertise in, and she'll talk about synaptic plasticity, Alzheimer's disease, and the health benefits of mindfulness meditation. Dr. Murali joined the Korean College in 2019, and she's also a certified EMT.
Yes.
Amazing, fantastic. Before starting in her current position, Dr. Murali worked for the Alzheimer's Association, a health nonprofit organization both in Orange County and in Rhode Island. And you went to Brown, if I recall.
I did, yes.
Yes, for your PhD.
Yes.
Yes, great. In 2013, and her research interests currently revolve around the relationship between chronic stress and Alzheimer's disease and lifestyle changes that can mitigate chronic stress. So that is fantastic. So welcome to our Healthy Brain, Healthy Mind podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, like personally. What drew you into becoming a researcher around like the brain, if you will?
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always loved just how fascinating the nervous system was. So I started out as a pre-med student, but pretty soon in my first year as a freshman in college, I realized that it was the research that drew me to this field. You know, I wanted to be by the bench rather than the bedside.
Right.
So I switched gear and I decided to go to grad school. And that's what I did. And as I went through my undergraduate education, I learned a little bit more about neuroscience. I wasn't a neuroscience major as an undergraduate, but what really fascinated me was how, the physiology of how the brain learns new information and how we are able to store and recall memory. And that is what synaptic plasticity is. I was very fortunate to be able to get into that area for my PhD training. And so I was able to study the physiology of how the synapses work together, synaptic transmission, and how that, there's just we have a phrase in the field, it goes like this, it says, neurons that fire together wire together, right? So I was just blown away by the understanding that circuits that are actively firing together are actually encoding and maintaining memory. And so if you lose your synapses or certain synapses in a circuit, you lose the memory. So this was very fascinating, and I got to study this in the rodent model of the brain, and I looked at the effects of acute nicotine administration on synaptic plasticity or learning in the brain reward circuit. And so this is the circuit in our brain that is normally activated when you experience or you're exposed to stimuli that require you to respond immediately because it's a matter of survival.
Sure.
So for things like when you're thirsty, you seek water. When you're hungry, you seek food, etc. But it turns out that drugs of abuse will activate this circuit even more potently than natural rewards. And it happens even with a single exposure. So essentially what drugs of abuse are able to do is they're able to hijack the brain reward circuit, so to speak, and they modify the circuit and the person that becomes addicted subsequently to the drug believes that they now need the drug for survival.
Right.
So it becomes a need rather than a want. So that was where I came from. And I had some experience working in the field of Alzheimer's disease. I worked with a neurotoxicologist at the University of Rhode Island when I was a research assistant there before grad school. So I was exposed to that field. And so after grad school, it seemed like a natural transition. These opportunities came my way, and that really, it was a no-brainer. So I really, I studied the physiology of learning and memory, and here was, a disease that affects learning and memory, and we don't know what the underlying cause is.
Right.
We don't have a cure yet. So that's how I got drawn into that field.
This is fascinating because I think our audience would really, I think, in the context of May's Mental Health Awareness Month, I think it's really important to talk about this idea of addiction. And maybe, like, I know you refer to the reward circuits. Is this the dopaminergic reward systems, the dopamine neurons in the brain? So for those of our listeners who don't know, I think I talk about this in my book, Science of a Happy Brain. The idea is that our brain is at our survival brain, that primal brain, actually putting it in the most precise way, strategies for survival actually are pleasure rewarding. So, like, whether that be reproduction, whether that is sleep, whether that is food or elimination, they actually begin to trigger our pleasure system. They release dopamine. So we begin to do these habits again. So the more you reproduce, or the reason why sexual activity produces dopamine and pleasure, as well as drinking or even sleeping, is that this is nature's way of saying, this is good for you to survive and the species to survive.
Exactly.
The problem becomes, again, as you're kind of hinting at, is that when we begin to have our brains operate on this primal pleasure reward circuit and kind of gets a feedback loop. So let's talk about meditation, because does your research begin to affirm, you actually, before I even go to that, what drew you into meditation?
Well, personal reasons. The main reason I started meditating was because my mom passed away. This was in 2014. I was very close to her, and it was a very difficult time for me. And so I started just experimenting. I had learned how to meditate as a child growing up in India, but I never really practiced it beyond, when I learned a little bit about it. So I started just practicing meditation, not mindfulness meditation, but just the meditation techniques that I had learned as a child. So I would do a body scan and then focus on my breath. And then I started reading more about it and attending classes as well. So I started reading this book by Adi Shankaracharya, who was an 8th century philosopher and saint, very famous in India. And so I read this book called Vivekachudamani, which he authored. And he goes through in a very logical fashion, the qualities that one should develop in order to lead a complete and purposeful life. And so I started implementing those values. There were a set of 9 values, and I started implementing that into my mindfulness or my meditation practice. And so every morning when I would sit for meditation, I would tell myself, about these values, and I'd tell myself, I'm going to practice these values today. And then I would go on to focus on my breath. And then as I progressed, I learned how to focus on awareness itself, so awareness of awareness. And then when I joined Chapman as an adjunct faculty in 2018, I heard about the fish mindfulness meditation certificate course that Dean Gail Stearns was teaching, and she actually talked to us about it at the faculty orientation. And immediately I wrote to her and I said, I'm interested. And so I took that course with her in spring of 2018. And so this sort of opened up this whole new avenue. And I learned about, mindfulness meditation practice as a secular practice. Since then, I've taken a couple of courses through the UCLA Mark Center as well. So my practice itself is a combination of techniques that I've learned through my Vedanta traditions, as well as the mindfulness based practices that the Fish Interfaith Center teaches here.
I actually want to jump on something because both of you and I have a South Asian, Indian ethnic heritage, cultural heritage. So in the Indian spiritual traditions, going within these contemplative practices are just embedded into our cultural fiber, if you will, our fabric, our spiritual fabric. But I think it's really important for our listeners to be aware that these contemplative practices, whether it's meditation, whether it's breath work, whether it is, just sitting still or yoga, if you will, they go back, thousands of years to all the spiritual traditions. It's only in the past 20, 30 years that empirical and brain science has really begun to investigate these practices. And so kind of on a nice plug for on the same vein, Manjari and myself are coordinating with Chapman's Brain Institute, and we are conducting a pilot study that explores the neural measurements and benefits of specifically mindfulness meditation that is done here at the Fish Interfaith Center, specifically around attention, emotional regulation. So for those of you who are interested, who are watching this, want to learn more, we can give you some information about that, probably in emailing you.
Yes, I would be the contact.
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be murali@chapman.edu. Yeah. And yeah, it's a very exciting new study that we're starting here. As Jay mentioned, this field of research is very young, and so we're only now beginning to understand all of the benefits of mindfulness practices, mindfulness meditation, as well as other mindfulness practices on the brain. So here at Chapman, we are exploring the effects of mindfulness meditation practices on attention span, memory, as well as emotional regulation and stress. So yeah, very exciting times. If you're interested, please contact us.
Yes, and there will be ongoing studies taking place here through FISH and through Korean and through the Brain Institute. But getting to this idea of how current medical or scientific brain science research has really begun to investigate this. Some of you, or you probably were, there was a researcher at, I think out of Harvard, John Kabat-Zinn.
He's from
Boston.
No, he's out of UMass Medical School.
Oh, okay.
Amherst.
Amherst.
Yes.
Amherst. Sorry, Amherst. I use Massachusetts, but was the Amherst. So John Kabat-Zinn was, I think, one of the first pioneers, scientists, researchers who really brought back from the East the looking at the possibility of doing scientific brain science investigation into the benefits of meditation. So this is a good segue because I think it really is important for us to talk about. I'm going to just share from my personal experience about how meditation really benefited me. And then I think we can go into some applied ways which we can begin to integrate them, the benefits of meditation, how it builds a better brain. I share, listeners are I'm a very open book toward my story. If you listen to the first podcast with Dr. Andrew Kami, we shared both Dr. Andrew Kami and myself shared how we both had parents who died from suicide. It was my mother and Dr. Kami's father. But I say this because 2 years before my mother died from suicide, the year before I started grad school at UCLA, I decided to travel and backpack around Asia by myself, thinking this might be the only last time I have to do this, opportunity to do this. So I took advantage of it, and I found myself in India, wanting to connect to my cultural heritage, and found myself in what we call an ashram. It's a spiritual ashram by a spiritual lineage and teacher. And it was there I learned the foundation for meditation. It wasn't mindfulness. It was a very specific type of meditation that came out of an ancient spiritual Indian tradition. But the point is that flash forward, a little later, 2 years later, after I was at this ashram learning the techniques for meditation, I also caveat by saying I actually had when I was a freshman at Northwestern, I had my faculty advisor who she made it her priority to instill the practice of meditation to her students. So this is, I'm not going to date myself, but this is going back at least way back before mindfulness meditation was the cool thing on campus. It was like, what are you doing? So, but I say that because I've had this strong exposure to meditation. So why I say this because after my mom passed away from suicide, I went through what you would call a mental down spiral, depression, anxiety. And so I say this with all sincerity that it was my meditation practice that was the safety net.
I totally agree with you in that. I will, this was the same thing for me as well. Yeah. I was very close with my mom and when she passed away from cancer, and it took me a good part of 2 years. And it was, I believe to a great extent, the mindfulness practice or the meditation practice that really helped me. And as I learned the mindfulness techniques, I added them to my practice. And so now I do, I do my meditation, but I also practice loving compassion meditation. And that really grounds me. And it taught me to, feel compassion for myself as well as for others. So it taught me to forgive myself, forgive others. And that really, that kindness and compassion really helps me stay grounded. It helps me, identify just through the practice of mindfulness meditation. I've been able to identify my purpose. So it's given I was able to, thankfully and gratefully, unfortunately, it involved passing away of a loved one, but I was able to use that as a springboard to take off and to discover my purpose in life. And the mindfulness practice, and I tend to do this, I try to do my mindfulness meditation practice in the morning before I start my day so that I can ground myself, and then I try to practice mindfulness informally through the day. And this involves, as John Kabat-Zinn would define mindfulness, he defined it as awareness arising from paying attention to present movement, activities, and tasks without judging. So being in the present. So I've doing the mindfulness meditation practice in the morning helps me sort of stay in that mode through the day. So then I'm able to be in the present moment and focus on my task. And this is I'm still a work in progress, but this has helped me become more efficient at my work. And I don't stress as much as I used to before about all the other tasks that are competing for time and priority. So I'm able to now better focus on the task at hand, efficiently get it done, and then go on to the next one. So subjectively, I've noticed just changes in my ability to pay attention, to focus on the task, become more efficient. I'm not as stressed or anxious anymore compared to years ago when I did not practice mindfulness meditation. So because I saw these subjective changes in myself and in being a neuroscientist, I thought about it and I said, okay, if I feel these changes within a few months of practice, others must have felt it too. So let me read the literature, see if something's out there. And that's kind of how I got interested in the field.
It's fascinating. I think you and I both have this wonderful, I think, life experience where we've both had personal loss and tragedy or just circumstances that have led us into the path towards, meditation, but also then as a springboard to kind of investigate the research scientific aspects of it. So you talk about the subjective benefits of meditation. So we're using meditation, mindfulness is your specific practice right now, but I think we should also be aware to our listeners that there are many forms of meditation. There's transcendental, there's loving kindness meditation, there's I'm just trying to think, there's walking meditation, there's Christian prayer meditation. meditation, maybe I should ask you, do you like, I know, do you have would you think that do you have a specific definition of what meditation is? Like, do you have a personal idea?
That's a good question. All right, let me see how I phrase that. Yeah, I think I would separate mindfulness from meditation. I do think that they are related. So when I meditate, my goal during meditation is to clear my mind of all thought. So first I work on focusing on a single thought, and then, in time, hopefully in a few minutes, if I can clear my mind of that single thought as well. So just be aware of my presence, right? Just be with myself. And that is easier said than done, right? And so what's rewarding about attempting that is whenever you experience that, even if it's just for a moment, it gives you the sense of immense satisfaction and peace and tranquility. And so that is the draw, and that's what draws me to attempt that every time. So when I sit down to meditate, I usually try to meditate for about 20 minutes or so. That's what works for me. The first process is to clear my mind of thoughts, and I remind myself of those 9 values that Adi Shankaracharya put forth. Say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I practice this today. And then I start to sort of quieten my mind down and try to focus on one thought, and then try to focus on no thought at all. And if I start to sort of get distracted, then I bring myself back either to, usually it's to my breath. That's my anchor. And so I try to, if I can achieve a few moments of quietude, that's a successful day. And then at the end of that practice, so that part, I consider that to be meditation. And then at the end of that, I practice loving kindness. And that I consider to be mindfulness, because I believe it's very important to be forgiving and kind and compassionate to yourself and to all other living beings. And so that's how I end my practice. So I think it's a combination of the two. So the meditation aspect of it is to achieve that single pointed attention, awareness of awareness, that kind of practice. Whereas the mindfulness aspect, I think of it as helping me achieve present moment focus, as well as learning to be compassionate. Kind and compassionate.
I want to just jump on a point you made, which I think is really, really valuable. And that is there are so many different lenses we can look at meditation. So you talk about the psychological, like the subjective well-being. Let's talk about the biological, the neurobiological. So you talk about the breath. You talk about our nervous system. What does meditation do biologically or neurologically to our bodies or brains?
So there are, so research until very recently has been focusing on the structural changes in the brain associated with meditation, and very interesting results in that area. So a number of MRI studies, and many of these have come out of Massachusetts General Hospital in collaboration with Harvard University, Boston University, different universities. And what they've found, and a big scientist in this field is Sarah Lazar, and her group discovered using MRI that mindfulness meditation practice, and even if it's just for a period of 8 weeks or so, causes increase in both gray matter and white matter in multiple brain regions. And so gray matter means there's an increase in the number of cell bodies, neuronal cell bodies, and white matter means there's an increase in the amount of myelination, which indicates that there are more axons in certain regions. And the regions where she found these increases in neuronal density were associated with attention, as well as learning and emotion regulation.
Well, that's a really great just there's so much we could talk about, but I think, I also want to just, say, how do you think, in your opinion, in your scientific, not just opinion, your scientific, as a researcher in meditation and the brain, the health benefits of meditation are profound. So we can talk about the psychological in terms of just bringing awareness to your breathing. So a lot of people, students, especially here at Chapman, or, even faculty, meditation is just too much for me. Well, I said, if you can breathe, you can meditate. So how does the breath connect with meditation? Because meditation, breathing meditation, how does even just shifting your breathing affect your neurobiology or state of being?
It's a little out of my area of expertise here, but so when you, a couple of things happening here. So when
you're the stress response system.
Right, exactly, yeah. So when you focus on your breathing, you're first of all allocating your attentional resources, right? So you're realigning where you want your attentional resources to be focused. So your the regions of the brain that are involved in selective attention are activated, and this involves multiple regions in the brain, both in the cerebral cortex as well as in lower parts of the brain. In addition, what you're doing is, as you focus on your breath, your breath starts to slow down and stabilize, and so you're going to be activating the parasympathetic branch of your autonomic nervous system, and that would involve the vagus nerve, and you,
our good old friend, the vagus
nerve. Yes, and so that's going to involve the lower regions of the brain, which include areas in the brainstem, the pons and the medulla. So that's where the respiratory centers are located. So you're also, interestingly, in the brainstem, you also have the norepinephrine nucleus called the locus coeruleus, if I'm pronouncing that right. And this region has projections to pretty much all other regions of the brain, including the regions in the cerebral cortex, as well as in the diencephalon and midbrain areas. And we're still learning more about the roles that the locus coeruleus plays in multiple functions, but we know that it's very important for attention regulation, because it's a diffuse system that helps you stay aware and attentive and focused, so that you can then pay attention to a particular task.
Let's actually talk a little more about this in terms of applications, because we can talk a lot about the scientific and which is great, which I think both you and I can just talk hours on this, because this is what we do as part of our research. But if I were to say, we have students here at Chapman, we have people at Chapman who suffered loss, trauma, grief, depression, anxiety of the past, several months due to COVID, and not just here, but everyone around the world right now. What way can meditation, or maybe the question is, what are the benefits of meditation on helping us heal from, say, grief, or let's say trauma, at least, or PTSD? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually read a couple of papers recently, and they were relating mindfulness meditation practices to emotion regulation and attention. And it's well established that mindfulness meditation helps you better control your attentional resources in your brain. But that is also very closely linked to emotion regulation.
Right.
And a study about a few years ago, published by Desbordes et al., and they're from, this was a collaborative study between Mass General and Boston University and Emory University in Atlanta. And what they looked at was three groups of people. So one group that trained in mindfulness meditation, another group that trained in compassion training, and this was a Tibetan-based practice, and a third group, which was the control, and they were an active control group that received a lot of information, and they had discussions on lifestyle changes that can decrease stress in life. And what what was interesting about their results was that they found that, and they were looking particularly, they did fMRI, and they were looking at the activity of the amygdala in response to emotionally stimulating images. So the subjects in a non-meditative state, so they were not meditating at the time of testing, they were asked to view images of people, and the images had positive, negative, or neutral valence. And when they were doing this, they were looking at the activity of your amygdala. And what they found interestingly in the mindfulness meditation group, their right amygdala was consistently activated at a lower level after mindfulness training. So after about 8 weeks of mindfulness training. And it was significantly lower compared to their pre-meditation training levels of activation. And another interesting thing they found, so this goes to show that mindfulness meditation helps with emotion regulation, and one of the benefits of that is the ability to attain equanimity. So being balanced in emotion, regardless of whether your circumstances, bring you sad news or happy news. So being able to stay, equanimous, I guess.
Yeah, equanimity.
Equanimity, yeah. Stay balanced, essentially.
Balanced, yeah.
And what they noticed that by being able to control or regulate their emotion, they were better able to allocate those resources to paying attention, to staying focused on the task, or just the process of selective attention.
I like to say, when your outside world feels out of control, learn to control your inside world. And I think a lot of us right now have been challenged with our outside world just being really out of control, not being able to control when is COVID going to end, when am I going to get my vaccine, when you come out to campus, work, etc. So this is, one thing that we I think I really like to say is that let's begin to focus on discerning what we have the ability to control. Our thoughts, our responses, learning to be more adaptive, not reactive to change uncertainty. And I think one thing that's really important for our listeners, to really recognize is that the human brain really evolved for this drive for predictability, routine, regularity, because that ensures survival. Like knowing where your food stock was going to come from, whether the rivers were going to be replenished, or when the hungry animals and predators are out, you have to know all these, who to trust, who not to trust, right? So any little thing that throws off that sense of safety, security, and stability triggers that primal survival brain, that stress brain. So if I'm hearing you, which I know, I think, I am, and I think our listeners could appreciate this as well, meditation begins to, if not remove the stress response system, because we can never effectively remove the stress response system. Trying to eliminate your stress response system would be like trying to eliminate your respiratory system. You die, right? Snakes come towards you, your stress response system isn't working, you die, or whatever. So, but the point is that we can learn to modify and regulate it.
Yes, absolutely. And, with the stress, so a stress, like you mentioned, Jay, is anything that threatens your survival. And this is something that we've had with us since our caveman days, and it's helped us survive as a species. Right. So a stressor is something that threatens your survival, and it's going to trigger your stress response, also known as the fight or flight response. And it has its benefits, and it's required for survival. Acute stress is great because it has health, it has health benefits. It increases your heart, increases your heart rate. It helps you break down glucose more efficiently. You're metabolizing glucose, breaking down fats to release energy. And your attention actually is much more sharper because you're now focused on that task of ensuring your survival, either fighting the threat or fleeing the scene.
Looking for the escape route.
Right, exactly. So acute stress is actually beneficial. However, chronic stress is the issue. And that has detrimental effects on multiple organ systems, including the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, the immune system.
Telomeres, like gene expression,
exactly,
chromosomes, the inflammation.
Yes, inflammation is a big one. It so happens that that chronic high levels of cortisol in the blood, which is cortisol is the hormone, the stress hormone released in response to a stressor. When there's chronic high levels of cortisol, that damages neurons in the hippocampus in the brain.
Yeah.
And the hippocampus is a region in the cortex that's
close to the amygdala.
Right, it's close to the amygdala. It's associated with the amygdala. It works in conjunction with the amygdala, which is involved in emotion regulation. And hippocampus has been implicated in learning, as well as memory consolidation and retrieval of memory. And this is the region that is first affected. This is the region where neurons first start to die in Alzheimer's disease.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the link between Alzheimer's disease and stress, chronic stress. Alzheimer's disease, actually, in most cases of Alzheimer's disease, we don't know what the cause is. Less than 10% of people with the disease have a genetic link. So 90% of cases are what we call sporadic. We have yet to identify the cause or the causes. And this is something that scientists have been working toward for a long time. But there's some research that shows that whatever the underlying cause is, that might actually be beginning to affect the brain maybe 10, 20 years before you start to see the first signs of memory loss. Yeah. And usually the first signs of memory loss appear in someone's mid-60s, which means, I start to wonder what's happening in my brain right now. Am I at risk for developing Alzheimer's disease? Right. And stress is a very plausible candidate, right? So that chronic stress, we know, damages neurons in the hippocampus. So could this be that trigger that sets off the sequence of events that results in the formation of amyloid plaques? Cascade
reaction. This is, there's so much, I think I like to say, we have learned more about the human brain in the past, 10 years than we have the past 1,000 years, right? And we're just at the cusp. Our brain institute here at Chapman does really great research around this. But let's talk about in terms of strategy. So if we were to list, for our audience out here right now, how can meditation? What are some simple steps we can do and take to begin meditation practice? It's like people say, I can't sit still for 20 minutes. Like, well, no, obviously you can. Imagine running a marathon on your first day of, taking up jogging. It's not going to happen, right?
Yep.
But we can build towards, because we can build like in the same way that we are able to train our bodies and our brains for playing a musical instrument or dance or athletic performance. Do you think that those same mechanisms apply into meditation? Like, what are some ways? The question I want to ask is, what are some simple ways in which we can, our listeners can begin to start a meditation practice?
Good question. And yes, all of those skills that you gain from all of these other practices will definitely help in starting a meditation practice. So at first, when you try to meditate, your mind is not going to be quiet. So you start by quietening your external environment. So find a quiet place in your home or wherever you are at work, and a quiet time of day, either first thing in the morning or last thing at night before you go to bed. So quieten your external environment first. And find, have a little spot where you can sit, even if you're just going to sit for 5 minutes. You don't have to be closing your eyes. You can just be quiet for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long practice. So quieten your external environment, make sure it's clean and it's always the same place. So you don't have distractions. You always go to the same place. And then the next challenge will be then to quieten your mind. If you have never meditate before, a half an hour before you need to run to an appointment. So make sure you're sitting down at a time of day when you don't have something that's some kind of deadline that's going to follow very soon. And yes, initially your mind is going to be filled with all the things from your past, maybe all the tasks that you need to do during the day. But in time, be forgiving of yourself. Don't let that inner critic trait take over. So just observe, just sit and observe. Let those thoughts run by, and in time they will slow down, and you will be able to focus on an anchor. Mm-hmm. That anchor could be focusing on your breath. You could count your breath, one in breath, one out breath, or just feel how, observe how that feels as you breathe in through your nostrils, as your chest, your lungs fill with air. You can feel the breath. Other things that you can focus on that you can use as your anchor include any part of the body. You do a body scan. You can focus on your the thumb of your left hand if you want. Just find one point of focus and try to keep your mind there for as long as possible. And one of my meditation teachers told me this, and I'm going to repeat that. It's kind of like observing a train come into the station. So observe the train. Don't get on the train. Let the train come and let the train leave the station. Your goal is to stay behind on the platform at the station. Mm-hmm. So that's the goal. So you'll find yourself wandering and with the thought, and then with practice you'll catch yourself doing that, and that's when you bring yourself back to the anchor. And just it takes time, and it is rewarding. You have to be patient with yourself and with the process.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a really great insight for our listeners. One thing I'll add to that, all this great information, is that we have tremendous resources here at the Fish Interface Center, in addition to our 6-week mindfulness meditation program that we offer here at the Fish Interface Center every semester. There are also for students at least, there is a 1-credit mindfulness mindfulness course taught here through the Religious Studies department. But this 6-week mindfulness program we have here at the Fish Interface Center is open to everyone here at Chapman, staff, faculty, students, administrators. And we also have a wealth of resources on our Fish Interfaith Facebook page. There's some videos, lots of videos actually, on mindfulness led by our own Dr. Gail Stearns. The last thing I'll maybe just say, before we kind of wrap up, is I like the word anchor. Yeah, I use that word a lot, and kind of like, we have to think about this in the context of evolution. Like our brains are always on the lookout for like threats in our environment. So we're always like projecting the future or dwelling on the past, but very, very rarely are we in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And so this actually goes back to some of the ancient wisdom traditions, like mostly Buddhism, for example. The idea is that we fail to recognize that everything in life is temporary. Yes. And the only moment you have control over, guess what, folks, what it is? It's the present moment. So, your body can only be in one place at one time. Your body, even though your mind can project in the future and dwell on the past, your body can only be in one present moment. So the reason why I like the breath as an anchor, I find that focusing on an anchor, for me, it's the breath. It anchors that wandering mind and brings it back into the present moment of the body. Mm-hmm. And so what I call your brain, your body, and being are united by the breath. Mm-hmm. So there are so many great resources on meditation, and hopefully by watching this you'll be inspired to meditate, even if it's just sitting still for 1 minute and just having a timer on your phone for 1 minute, saying this 1 minute I'm just going to focus on my breathing. That 1 minute turns into 3, 5, 10, and before you know it, you're going to be seasoned meditators like Dr. Manjari and myself. But we really encourage everyone to meditate. Meditation builds a better brain, but it also, as you hinted at and referred to, it can also bring about a better society. We have more compassion. There's a lot of research happening right now, which is actually a segue into our topic for next week. I'll be speaking, our guest will be Veronica Clanton-Higgins, who is a social worker here at Chapman. we'll be talking about healing from the trauma of hate and injustice. And so there's a lot of research coming out that shows how mindfulness meditation or meditation in general can really help heal racial trauma and help us become more compassionate and more kinder. I like to say that compassion begins with yourself, and when you are learn to be kind to your mind, you can learn to be kind to others. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it was a pleasure. So you're welcome to watch more episodes of the Healthy Brain, Healthy Mind podcast series on our Facebook page at the Fish Interface Center and SoundCloud as well. But be sure to tune in to, again, I said our next week will be, the topic will be healing from the trauma of hate and injustice. I'm Dr. Jay Kumar, and I was thrilled to have you here, Dr. Manjari Murali, as our guest for today.
Thank you.